this is going on in Florida, but some are dubbing this the trial of the century, I guess comparing it to that O.J. Simpson fiasco that happened years ago. Hopefully the Zimmerman trial in Florida is not going to be quite like that. But what is interesting to me about it is watching the police officers testify. And we talked about this week, and just looking at it from the outside here, I give you the example. One example is the prosecutor, I think on Thursday, one of his first moves on Thursday morning was to strike from the record this police detective's opinion that Zimmerman was being truthful to him. The prosecutor moved to do that. And I mentioned to you, you and I have prosecuted a lot of cases together, me as the detective, you as the prosecutor. I've never quite heard of anything like that. It's almost like the detective in this case, that's sort of what you do with hostile witnesses.
Well, I think, because I followed up on that, and I think the defense attorney is the person that asked him the question, and the next morning he didn't like the answer because it was basically an opinion, and he didn't like the answer, and so he asked that it be struck from the record, I think.
Yes. And the jury instructed too. I think.
Yeah. Well, admonished. The jury is admonished not to consider that answer. But of course, that's like unringing a bell.
Yes.
Once it's rung, it's hard to unring it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. I mean, I would just move on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a big deal out of that sort of thing. I mean, it's enough's enough. The interesting thing, Officer Don, is that real trials fascinate people. I mean, they start watching these things, and it's so different than the TV or the internet shows or whatever they are that are just kind of created, fiction kind of thing. People are fascinated by this real, live trials. And I mean, last night I knew that you wanted to talk about this, and so I went and looked at the lead detective's testimony and his being questioned by the defense attorney, and it was smooth. I mean, it was really smooth.
The detective's testimony was smooth.
Well, I thought the defense attorney was particularly smooth about it. You know, there's no shouting, no screaming. It's just matter of fact going through the process. And people have really tuned into this Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case.
Well, let's face it, what makes the case interesting from a cop standpoint is this is a situation where the police obviously made a decision early on that they didn't feel the charges were appropriate. I mean, we know that happened because there's a big controversy over it. The local prosecutor in this process, the local DA, he didn't even bring this before the grand jury, nor did he bring charges. So after those two checks and balances happened, they decided to bring a special prosecutor in. Normally in a case where they bring a special prosecutor in, there's a conflict. That's the reason they bring the special prosecutor in. For instance, the local prosecutor maybe knows the defendant, maybe knows the victim. There's a connection there that would cause you to bring a special prosecutor in, correct?
A legal conflict that would give the appearance of impropriety of somebody prosecuting the case.
But in this particular case, that really, the prosecutor has never said why he felt there was an issue, why he needed a special prosecutor. That's sort of fascinating to me.
Well, you're starting to see that now in this trial. This brings up the old self-defense, stand your ground, castle doctrine kind of stuff. And if you want to talk about that for a second, it's far more complicated than just, well, we're not going to make a charge.
Well, and I do, because here's the deal. They had recently passed the Stand Your Ground law in Florida. Anytime that there's a new law passed, the prosecutors and the police have to be schooled on what the spirit and the letter of that law and how that applies to prosecuting cases. I think what happened in this case was stand your ground was passed. The police and the prosecutor, the local prosecutor, now this is my opinion based on my experience, looked at this and said, well, based on that law, we don't have a charge here. That's what happened, because stand your ground seemed to actually be designed to discourage police and prosecutors from automatically charging somebody anytime there was a shooting. That was the deal. And when they looked at it, they said, look, based on that law, we don't see an applicable charge here. It doesn't really matter whether or not we like George Zimmerman. It doesn't matter whether or not we think that maybe he was overzealous in his neighborhood watch.
All right, let me explain how it works. Stand your ground laws basically say you have a right to be where you are in public. Nobody has a right to tell you or to force you out of that position. You don't have to run away if you feel like you're being threatened with serious physical injury or death. You can, in fact, defend yourself. And if you believe, in Kentucky, if you believe that you're under the threat of serious physical injury or death from somebody, then you can, in fact, use deadly physical force. You see. Now, here's the kicker, Officer Don, with these laws. Those laws make police decide. They have to make a decision, a determination as to whether or not the person that's